I'm Scott Al Miller. This is my life living in Nicaragua. It is the beginning of the new year, and I'm doing a lot of videos during our slow week. So these are not the most exciting videos of the year. I'm getting some important information out because I think 2025 is going to be a really amazing, good year for us. But the first week of January is always very slow, so we're getting some foundation information out there while I'm here in Houston, Texas. I'll be back in Nicaragua about a third of the way through January, so looking forward to get back there. We're going to have a little update on how things are going here, and today we're going to talk about the challenges of getting things through Aduana when you're coming into Nicaragua. And if you're not familiar with Aduana, that is the Spanish word for customs, and it's a good one to know because when you deal with anything here in Nicaragua or throughout Latin America, it's going to be called Aduana and not customs. So that's a word you're going to want to know because you're going to use it every time you go through the airport, the border, anything. So we're going to be talking about Nicaraguan Aduana and how you can gauge your chances of getting things through, what you can and can't bring for 2025 right after the bump. I've got some significantly bright sun today. So before we get into today's topic, a little update on how things have gone for us here in Texas. So one of the big things we were doing while we were in Texas is renewing our driver's licenses. We are officially Texans, and we have Texan driver's licenses and have for a very long time. It turns out about 16 years. Well, at 16 years, you need to renew your license here in Texas, and it also requires at that time that you do so in person. It's no big thing, but you do have to make an appearance, mostly because they want to make sure it's really you and get a new picture and that kind of stuff. Nothing big, but it does require that visit. So we scheduled way ahead of time. At the beginning of December, we scheduled to come and do that. We had a visit already, and on the morning that we went to do our update, we found that the systems statewide for the DMV system, known as the Texas DPS, or Department of Protective Services, I believe is correct, I think that's right. They were down. We got a notice this is down. They never said not to come, but they said that their computer system was down and that we had the ability to reschedule. Well, of course, we didn't have the ability to reschedule because we don't have that much flexibility while we're here, and it's the holidays, which makes things very difficult. So we didn't get the instructions not to go, so we went, and when we got there, we found that they had brought down the barriers, completely closed the place up, left no information, didn't tell us what to do or what we could do. We got some kind of ambiguous note telling us we could come at some time and they would honor our appointment, but they didn't tell us when that time was, and we came at the time of our appointment and they weren't honoring it then or immediately thereafter. So it's unclear when we can come because they're not open the day after or the day after that. So indefinitely sometime with no particular information, they said we would honor something that they demonstrated that they weren't doing at any possible time that we were there. So we're not exactly sure what we were supposed to do. I did manage to find an employee as they were leaving the place and asked what was going on. He said, yeah, the computers are down for the indefinite future. He said you could try in 3 days to come back, but of course they're not even going to make the first attempt at reopening the place. And the last time they had something like this, which was less than a year ago, so this is not unprecedented, they were down for days or weeks. It was a major outage just 11 months ago. So to try to do anything based on maybe they'd be open in 3 days doesn't seem like a good idea. But no matter what, our flights to New York, or first thing, by the time you're seeing this, this is all over, but we're heading to the airport at the evening of the 1st, January 1st, and we will be flying out we have to go to the airport at 3 a.m. On the 2nd, we'll be in New York in the afternoon, late afternoon, and we'll be there for a little while until we're in Nicaragua again. But so that they're not going to even try to reopen until after we are already at least halfway to New York. So we'd have to completely reschedule our flights, cost a fortune, all to find out whether or not they've bothered to get their computers up. But they clearly didn't bring the computers up the first day. Then the next 2 days are holidays, so they're fully closed. Are they working on the computers? There's no reason to believe so. They have not done so in the past. They have not put in any kind of effort to be up. And the things that brought them down several months ago were all completely predictable and preventable things, that they didn't take their uptime or their security seriously. They were using third-party antivirus, running Windows on government systems, things that really should border on criminal because they're obviously negligent in such a way that no one could honestly say that they had done their diligence in the IT field to have deployed those things. So somebody worked around due diligence to get those things deployed in the first place. And so just those things, right? We know they're mishandling public funds. We know that they're doing things that violate professional standards in the IT range. So why would they be racing to get things up when they've already put in the effort not to be doing a good job for security and stability, there's no reason to think so. And history has shown it's not very likely. And they had a breach in October, so they've really got a track record just in the last year alone of being exposed for the mistakes that they've made and being breached, probably based on those things. So if we were to try to reschedule, there is every possibility that the entire time we're in New York, they may not be back up. So we have no idea what we could possibly do. So we're stuck flying back to Nicaragua without our driver's licenses and trying to figure out what to do from there. But we have so many things that make it difficult to come back because we have our cedula reprinting that we need to do. But that's going to be easy. It's just a few days after we get back, but we can't stay here longer because of that. But our tickets, our flights would cause a big problem for that anyway. And we have limited time that we're allowed to be in the United States. We're going to check and see how easy it is for us to get back, but it may be that I can't even attempt again to get a license until sometime around the middle of March. So these complications caused by the technological black hole that is the United States are pretty impactful when you don't have the flexibility to just wait weeks and hope for the best and show up whenever. And anyone who works on a tight schedule or has a job that can't just randomly give them time off, these things are really a big deal. This is one of the constant complaints we have and hear about from the United States, that is, if you're wealthy and have a lot of flexibility, a lot of the things are not a very big deal. But if you are poor or have very little flexibility, you have a job that just doesn't, have the ability to let you go anytime, just go wait for a day and see if they open, or go wait in a long line, or go see if they're going to be able to take you today. No, those things are very impactful to jobs that may have to, if you're a small business, you may have to shut down your shop while you go try to do these things and lose revenue during that time. Whereas, someone with a more flexible job, or just has employees that's able to work for them, part of a bigger company, they may not have those limitations. So these things are very impactful to certain groups of people, and we're really feeling that, right? We're really feeling this technological backwardness that is so prevalent in the United States. And, we notice it in other things too. I'm going to do a video about some of the things we've discovered while in the U.S., being away for so long. But definitely one of them is the really large lack of cell phone coverage in major metropolitan areas. It's not something we had really noticed before. And we have lacks of coverage in Nicaragua too, but mostly those are in super rural areas. You're out in between populated zones, and it's just wide open countryside, and there's rolling hills, so it's hard to get a signal, and there's no one out there, so who's going to pay for a tower? And you lose some signal, and it's more or less predictable and expected. If you had coverage there, you'd be pretty impressed. But in the middle of the Houston metro, to have big areas where you have no coverage and can't get on your cell phone, really surprising. And the speeds don't seem to be as good compared to Claro, but better compared to Tigo. So it's in the middle of the road, but I was shocked not to find it to be much more responsive than we were experiencing. So that's where we've been. It's really given us a lot of challenges with how we're going to be handling logistics, and we still have no idea what we're going to be doing to best handle the situation, because this really interrupts all of our upcoming plans. It makes it very difficult for me to do a lot of things for the show that we were really looking forward to starting as soon as we were back in January. We're prepared to go out and do all kinds of driving trips because we finally had the flexibility to do that, and we've lost that because the U.S. can't issue driver's licenses here in Texas during the entire time that we're here. Okay, so Aduana or customs here in Nicaragua. A lot of people, when they're coming to Nicaragua, get a lot of questions about customs, because Nicaraguan customs is one of the most stringent and difficult to work with in Latin America, and that includes the Western Hemisphere, right? The U.S. and Canada are actually generally really, really easy from a customs perspective, and this can actually make it more challenging for someone coming to Nicaragua, because so many people are coming from the U.S. and Canada where it's so easy. So if you're coming into the U.S., which I did recently, and I just want to say, I mentioned this before, but in the past, maybe 10, 15 years ago, returning to the U.S. from traveling abroad was often a less than happy experience. The U.S. didn't feel like they wanted to have you back, and they seemed to go through a lot of work to try to make you not want to travel or not want to return. But in recent years, and I mean like as many as 10, but definitely for the last 5, that has really changed. Both they've made the systems much easier, and the people working at border control have gone from very stern and unhappy with you to very welcoming and helpful and friendly, and it's really been a completely different experience. And this last time coming in through Houston was excellent, right? It was the whole process was smooth and fast, huge lines of people, and they just flew right through. It was crazy. And the person who went through our stuff, like, he was professional and on top of things and smiling and welcome to the United States. And as an American, one, I don't want to be given the side eye for having exercised my rights as an American. That doesn't make me feel good. And I certainly don't want people who are coming to visit my country getting this "you're not welcome" feeling, right? So I'm really appreciative of the steps that the U.S. has taken that are very obvious to fix this impression that they have been used to give at the border. So that's been fantastic. And of course, we could attribute some of that to the security panics after 2001. A lot of things changed, like the creation of the hard border at Canada that wasn't there as a kid. Going to and from was really, really smooth, and then it became a hard border. And so we saw a lot of changes come all at once. So I'm sure some of that had a role to play in that, but that has been corrected now, and I'm very happy with that process. So thanks to the U.S. for making that very positive change. But when you get past border control, right, so you first go past border control or immigration, and you get into the country or halfway into the country, then you go through, and this is in the U.S., you go through customs. And in the U.S., generally that customs process is like walk through a customs zone. There's basically no process that you have to do under most circumstances. It's so easy that many people are unaware that they've gone through customs at all. It's just a department that exists. You're like, oh, I see signs for it, and that's the end of it. But most countries, you have to make a written declaration, which is not a big deal, but it's annoying. Always carry a pen when you travel for exactly that reason. But it's normally not too much, and often you have to put your luggage through a scanner, but it's just an x-ray scanner. Normally it's very fast. It's nothing like the TSA check-ins. That's a security scanner where they're like really looking for all kinds of stuff. The customs and Aduana scan is much more of we're looking to see if you're importing a whole bunch of something funky, and one's for security and one is for importation checking. So it's definitely a lighter check, but different things can be caught. Like one, you're not allowed to carry a knife onto a plane, for example. So TSA is really worried about sharp objects. A pair of tweezers even. I don't know if you're allowed to have tweezers, but like something like that, maybe they'd be like, this is too sharp, you can't have this. This bottle of water, you can't have this. But customs, they don't care if you have 100 bottles of water. They don't care if you have 20 pairs of tweezers, right? It's a completely different thing. They care if you're importing something that you would need to pay taxes on, or potentially has an infection vector, right? Oh, you're bringing in fruit? Well, no, you can't do that because fruit can carry diseases or insects that could infect other things and cause a catastrophe to the agricultural sector. So they have to look for a completely different set of things. So that's why customs exists. Right, they're there to keep you from bypassing importation controls and using normal travel or semi-normal travel as a means of bypassing the taxation and tariff system that exists for products being imported. Right, this is why companies that do importation exist, is so they can manage those things, work with the government, pay those taxes, and so forth. So if you could bypass that, you pose a risk to the tax foundation, and it's like cheating other businesses. The businesses that are paying their taxes, they are not going to be happy if you're able to just travel around and not have to pay the same taxes that they have to pay. So that's why that department exists worldwide. The U.S. makes possibly the best process for that I know of anywhere. Of course, it does have one of the busiest borders, so there's reasons that it makes sense there, but it is very impressive. Going through most of Latin America, simply you have to fill out a form. Under normal circumstances, say I'm not declaring anything, your luggage looks normal, it goes through an x-ray scanner, and that is that. Nicaragua has a much more stringent customs or Aduana control system. Now, this could be at a land border like Piñas Blancas, where you come in from Costa Rica, or it could be at Guasale, where you come in from Honduras. It could be in Managua, where you're coming in by airplane. And there's other borders as well. Those are the main three that most people are going to experience. When you come in, you go through the same process. You got to do that written paper. It's like copied for every country. It's like almost exactly the same piece of paper. You say, I don't have $10,000 cash or more. I'm not declaring any of these weird things that they list, but read it, make sure you're not, and never carry more than that amount of cash. You're allowed to as long as you declare it, but don't. And then you go through the x-ray scanners. However, in Nicaragua, there are several things that are more limiting than most countries. Every country has something you're not allowed to do, so some research is always good. Nicaragua has a few that catch people off guard because they are really, really serious about not impacting businesses that are importing goods. And this is, it's very easy in a country like Nicaragua that has a very fragile economy and businesses struggle to maintain their margins. It would only take, because it's such a small country, with such a fragile economy, it would only take one or two people, like me, for example, if I wanted to start smuggling in, let's say, laptops, and I wanted to start my own computer store. Well, if I was allowed to bring in, say, 4 or 6 laptops per person, my family could fly in with 24 laptops without too much of an effort. And many stores in Nicaragua will only have an inventory of 10 to 20 laptops at any given time. We could come in tax-free if they allowed us to do that and stock an entire store, completely bypassing any immigration controls. And so as expats who have access to the U.S. market, we could bring in tax-free goods and sell them at a store and completely undercut the local market for Nicaraguans who are trying to run an honest business, but they have to pay importation taxes because they're unable to get a visa to go to the United States to buy the same things and come back. So it would be an unfair advantage, and that unfair advantage would go to the foreigners at least 9 out of 10 times, maybe more. And that is absolutely nothing that any government anywhere wants to have happen. But in Nicaragua, it's much more risky that it could happen. And so they have to watch this a lot more than, say, the U.S. does, where, yes, the same thing could happen in the U.S., but they already tend to have cheaper mainline goods available in country that you can't offset most things coming in by doing a flight, whereas the taxes for goods into Nicaragua, the flights are so cheap, the taxes are so great because it's a full importation of electronic goods, and you're able to buy those things so much cheaper outside the country because of large-scale shipping, that, and because many of the parts sourced from the U.S., it's very easy to have this become a major problem in Nicaragua very quickly, whereas in the United States, it's relatively difficult. It can still happen for sure, and the U.S. does look for it, but it's much harder to have happen. It's much more obvious when it does, and the chances of it being impactful are relatively small. Yes, there may be someone who's able to get something through tax-free, but the chances that they're going to completely put someone out of business or have any individual business with an appreciable impact to an individual rather than a really tiny impact across a large market is very small, because the United States is a giant country, and that importation represents a very small percentage of it. The amount of border crossing that goes on with the U.S., while very large, as a percentage is much smaller. And so there's just a lot of ratios that get changed a lot. And so Nicaragua just has to be much more stringent. So that's why they're looking for those things. So some of the things that are going to be limits and ways to think about things. One is you're only allowed a hard limit of 1 cell phone per person. Yes, every so often someone gets through with 2. You can take your chances, but they don't recognize the I have a personal one, I have a business one as a valid reason to have 2 phones. So just be aware it's supposed to be 1 phone per person. And that one, I don't know if you're allowed to declare it and just pay a tax on it. They're really stringent about phones coming in. You probably can. I have not checked. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Anything that is telecom related, so a wireless access point, a router, a switch, all those completely allowed. Utterly allowed. You remember, customs is not about blocking you from bringing things. Sometimes they do, right? Fruit, meat, yeah, you're not bringing food in. But when it comes to like electronics and laptops and all those kinds of things, they're not there to stop you bringing stuff in. They're there to make sure that you're bringing in tourist stuff and being taxed on things that are being imported. That is all. They're there to make sure that you're not bypassing the importation tax. So all these things are fine. Just declare them. You can say, whoa, you know what? I do have 5 laptops. I'd like to import them. No problem, right? But phones, that's the one I don't know if you're allowed to declare it and bring it in, or if you just have it confiscated if they find it. So 1 phone per person, just be smart about it. Normal travelers, why would you want 2 phones? I know people who are like, but I use 2 phones. It's generally not a good practice, but I understand some people do. It's just a limitation. I'm sorry. Generally, you're allowed, without any question, 1 laptop per person, 1 tablet, iPad kind of thing per person, plus your phone. I've had no problem bringing in mini desktops. I know tons of people who've done that. No problems whatsoever. That's considered completely normal. But if you're bringing in big things that couldn't possibly be for travel, we're going to talk about that in a second, those you tend to get hit with, right? An Xbox, a PlayStation, a full-size tower PC, those are not things you're traveling casually with. Expect those to be flagged, right? Anything that is a lot of a single thing. Right now, if you're bringing in, like we brought in a ton of cookies from Argentina, that's fine, right? But be aware, we had no idea. You have to have anything that you're bringing in that's food like that. Now, these are fully wrapped, checked, like they were safe. This wasn't like raw vegetables or anything. They had no problem with cookies, but they had to look at the expiration dates on them because you're not allowed to bring expired food into the country. That caught us by guard. We figured stale food was okay. It is not. So they had to go take the time and look through all that. Once they did that, yeah, no charge, no nothing. They laughed about it. They were like, this is hilarious. But it was tin wrapped cookies, so it really showed up on the x-ray. If you had unwrapped cookies, you may not even get questioned, but it was really obvious. So Little things like that. If you're traveling normally as a normal traveler and honestly just traveling and none of your stuff is meant to stay behind, you're probably going to run into no problem whatsoever. But anything that is telecom related, so back to that, the wireless access points, switches, routers, things like that, those have a specific telecom tax. It's not that you're bringing in lots of them. It's not that they think you're importing them and never going to take it away. Those are things that have a cost because they verify the equipment when it comes in. And it just takes a little bit of time and it's not that expensive, but be aware. All of those things officially have a price for bringing them in, and they don't consider them things that normal tourists would use. And honestly, very few do. I do because I work in that space, and having that equipment is sometimes quite important. So I have been known to, when I lived in Spain, I did that. When I lived in Italy, I did that. So I have done that as a tourist. I understand that it does happen. Under normal circumstances, 99% of people would never even know why they would do that, let alone find a value to doing so. So that's not something that they expect to see. So just be aware that that's something that you will get hit with an additional fee for if they're aware that you have it. Drones. Most people are aware, but if you have not heard this, drones are not allowed in Nicaragua. People are often really shocked by this, but the United States is currently contemplating eliminating the right to bring in, and the wording is Chinese-made drones. However, it basically means foreign-made drones, right? Because China makes essentially all the drones that the United States doesn't make, and Nicaragua, you would only be importing drones made abroad. So it's actually the same law that the United States is looking at doing. If Nicaragua was to produce their own drones domestically, you'd be allowed to bring those in, I guarantee. Technically, I can't promise that that is the case, but I do guarantee that they would, because if they're letting you make them locally, they're going to let them cross the borders, right? That should go without saying. Same thing is happening potentially in the U.S. This is being entertained in the U.S. That they're looking at. I don't know if they're actually looking at Nicaragua's laws or just having the same response. But the U.S. is currently voting on whether or not they are going to stop the importation of foreign drones. Not 100% technically worded that way, but effectively in the very near future. So this shouldn't be that shocking to most of the audience, because that the U.S. it's a law that the U.S. is very seriously considering. The fact that Nicaragua has already done it shouldn't be a big surprise. The big surprise is no one else in the region has done it, and we're hoping really hard that Nicaragua decides to reverse this, but at the current moment, I've heard no mention of that possibly happening, so assume it's not going to happen, at least in 2025. Drones just aren't allowed in. If you're going to be coming in from a nearby country, consider just shipping it over Nicaragua. If it's, going from Guatemala to Costa Rica, you can just ship it by air freight or whatever. It'd be very cheap to get it there and have no worries, and you just can't have them in Nicaragua. Do people smuggle them in? Of course, all the time. You see drone footage from around the country on a lot of channels. People are just taking their chances, right? I don't have a drone. It's not a risk I'm willing to take. My channel's a bit more high profile, so I really don't want to take that risk unnecessarily, but I'm really hopeful that we can talk Intour into, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and being like, this channel would really benefit if it had good drone footage. So we're hopeful, but we've been hopeful for years and nothing has budged. So expect that, if I can't get a drone, chances are you can't get a drone, right? I'm a full resident with a channel and can make a very good argument as to why it would be beneficial and worth the paperwork for me to have a drone. And it's not even up for consideration. So, but cameras and other gear, right? GoPros, film cameras, DSLRs, big lenses, binoculars, all that stuff is completely protected. You're absolutely allowed to bring those in always. No questions whatsoever. There's actually a law in place that protects bringing those in across the border. So of all things, you should have no worries with that. It's an area where people love to try to say that, oh, there's a scary thing. Be careful what cameras you bring. Absolutely not. That is utterly false. You can bring in anything you want, and trust me, no one brings in more. This is probably an actual honest statement. No one brings in more camera gear than I do. Every trip out of the country, I'm coming back with multiple cameras. And at the time that I'm recording this, three brand new cameras, or new to me anyway. One is used, two are brand new, plus an upgraded iPhone. And the rules that they had would actually have made iPhone, when they talked about the rules, when people have contemplated what they might do, those would have limited things like iPhones as well, so they really weren't going to work, and they never went into place. There is a rule that some people reference that was never in place that could have made some complications with this, but it was because of that rule that the law that you can't put any limits on cameras was put in place. So feel absolutely rest assured, it's only drones that you have to worry about in that way. Now, when it comes to the mindset around Aduana, what is it that you should have? And it basically comes down to this. Except for the very isolated things that we've mentioned, for the most part, Aduana is looking, or Customs is looking to make sure you're not importing in such a way that you can start a business or bypassing the taxes and tariffs on things that should be imported. So could you go to a business in Nicaragua and buy these things? Are they things that are reasonable for you to have as a tourist? So that's basically the rule of thumb. And this is more or less how Customs works worldwide. Just Nicaragua is much more stringent, is that they're going to look at the things that you have, and if they are reasonable for a traveler, right? It's a laptop, it is a iPad, it is your clothing, it is some food, it is, some cameras, it is whatever, right? It's normal things that you would use while on vacation, even up to, a month or two. And things you would not leave behind or are consumable. Yep, your toothpaste, that'll get left behind, but it's consumable. They don't care. Some snacks, yeah, consumable. But if you start bringing in, you have 100 of the same shirt, that doesn't seem like something that a tourist would have. 5, sure, that's enough for you to change every day while you're here. But the exact same shirt, now if you have a load of clothing, that's fine. But you're bringing in the exact same thing 100 times. You're bringing in things that are brand new and never opened with lots of them. Things like that. It starts to become obvious that, okay, you're going to be selling these while you're here. Or as I've seen, right, people bring in big desktop computers. Well, I've never heard of someone traveling with one of those as a tourist. It's always that they're planning on moving and they plan on leaving it behind, or it's going to die there. Well, that's fine. You're completely allowed to have those things. You just need to pay an import tax on them, because that's not a tourist thing. That is you're legitimately importing it, right? Now, some people, there is some gray area here, and it can get difficult, but I've never once had someone argue about what Aduana taxed them on that we didn't know that they were actually importing it and that they just got busted. They were upset that they got busted, and they'll claim that they were planning on using it as a traveler, but they weren't, right? Now, somewhere there is a gray area, and there are people who are going to bring some, I'm a big time gamer and I love to travel, but I have to have this big monster computer with me all the time when I travel because of it happens, right? But I've never met that person. It's such an outlying case, and they may be able to have a lot of documentation about it if that's what they're doing, and you might be able to make a really good argument about it. But what I've seen, for example, is when the last time I had to deal with Aduana, which was years ago, I came through and the person who was in line next to me or whatever had home water filter kits. And I don't mean like the Brita, potentially for tourists. These are things that are filters to install in your water filter in your house. So absolutely the intent was clear that he brought gear to be installed in a house that he was renting or owned, and was trying to bypass importation controls. No problem bringing in a filter. Of course you're allowed to bring in a water filter. You're encouraged to bring in water filters by all means, but they have to have a tax on them. Now, a lot of people will get away and not get caught because it's not a very big thing, but he got caught and he was very upset. He kept trying to claim that he was using it as a tourist, but a tourist does not know what water filtration system is going to be in the house, nor is it their responsibility to put a filter in. The hotel you're staying in, or the Airbnb that you're staying in, or whatever that you're renting, it's their responsibility to put in the water filters, not you. You're not bringing a water heater with you. You're not bringing solar panels for a roof. You could bring a little pocket one for recharging your phone, of course, but you can't bring, construction materials for your own house and expect not to have to pay importation duties. So if we really stop and think about it, we all know when we're importing versus when we're just traveling and have normal things that we plan to keep in our luggage and come and go with. It kind of goes without saying, yet it's a little bit difficult to define because it is a little bit different for everyone, and there is some gray area, but we all really deep down know. And so if you are bringing things in and you're honestly on vacation, you're not planning on selling anything, you're not planning on installing anything and leaving it behind, it's not a one-way trip for the things that you're bringing, unless it's food or toothpaste or whatever, then you're going to be fine, and you're going to be fine. You're not doing anything weird. If you're bringing in stuff and your intent is to either give it away or to sell it to someone, and giving stuff away still impacts local businesses. So don't be surprised if you're like, well, but I brought a number of things, but I want to give them out as gifts. That's no problem. Nicaragua loves that you want to give things out as gifts. That's perfectly fine. But if you're bypassing importation controls, there are taxes that needed to be paid on those because there's a local business unable to sell those things now because you brought them in. And so those taxes need to be paid to keep the field level, because whatever you're going to give away, in theory, you could have bought inside the country as well. and have paid those taxes. And for those of us who do, we talk about this a bit. We order from like Amazon or whatever, and we have things shipped into the country by maritime or by plane. And we don't talk about that we have to pay taxes on that. That's because our shippers are paying the taxes on that for us. So we do pay it, but we don't pay it as a discrete fee. We pay it as part of our shipping fee. So anytime that I'm ordering, say, that same water filter from Amazon in the United States, and I have it brought into Nicaragua, it'll cost me hardly anything. It's a minimal fee. I'm going through the proper importation controls where I'm upfront that I'm bringing it in. The taxes are being paid on it automatically, and it's being paid through a importer who has an agreement with Aduana. They do this all day, every day. They sit down together and they look over what they have and pay the bills in an efficient way. When you come through the border and don't declare an item, you're going through an incredibly inefficient way. One, you're making them catch you. Two, they're making them figure out what's going on. It's a really costly system to a government to have to catch you coming through customs with something rather than having it go through an import control. So they're going to encourage you really heavily to go through that import control. So one of the things is they don't want me bringing in something like a water filter in my luggage, because I can easily ship it in a box and they get their whatever from a water filter. It's probably in the 50 cents to $1 category. Like, it's not a lot of taxes that they're getting, but they get it automatically. We don't have to have a discussion. I'm not going to fight them. We're not using resources to do it. It just passes through their desk. They go, whoop, there's our dollar. Whoop, there's our dollar. Right. And it's cost effective. So it's everybody wins when people are literally smuggling things in. There's a lot of losers, right? The local businesses can't sell this stuff, and those of us who are paying our taxes are having to pay more. So it's not fair to anyone. That's the mindset. And as long as you're thinking of things that way, and a lot of people are trying to smuggle things in, and many times people get away with it and many times they don't. Just be aware that you will know when you are smuggling and when you are not. It's very straightforward, right? If you are doing it as a tourist and it has no intent of staying behind, you're almost guaranteed to be completely safe. And if you are intentionally bringing something in your luggage with the intent of it becoming a permanent fixture in Nicaragua, whether by being given away, sold, or installed somewhere, then you are trying to get away with something that quite often you will. And many times you can tell them what you're doing and they'll be like, I don't care, right? There's many things that are just like, okay, you brought one extra shirt to give away. I don't care. You brought a little bit of, half a piece of luggage of, little tiny thing. I don't care, right? It's when it's big things that actually impacts a store, or they really understand how they're able to tax it or whatever. So it is kind of arbitrary. It depends who you get. It's going to depend on day to day. But there are things you can do to protect yourself and know what your risks are. And again, you don't get in big trouble. You just have to put in some time dealing with customs, pay your bills, and then go. But that can take some time and it's a lot of effort. And if you ever have it happen to you, which I have, I would say it would be really hard for me to figure out how it is possible to bring something in that would be worth it to me to take that risk. Not that it was so expensive, not that it was scary or anything like that. It was immensely time-consuming and frustrating, and then there was some cost on top of it and other things, and that totally was not worth it, which I think is a lot of their goal. Even if they're not going to tax you heavily, they want to make sure that this is annoying and not a process you want to follow. They want you to, they've got really good, easy, cheap ways to either buy things in country or ship them in or declare what you have or not bring things, right, that make everything work. And they're gonna funnel you towards those things in a practical way that makes you make the decision, oh, this is just the way I want to do it. And if you're just addicted to that smuggling process, okay, that's fine. They're going to hit you with higher fees and a lot of annoying time-consuming stuff as a punishment for doing so. And, people take their chances. Everybody decides what matters to them. But that should give you what you need to know to understand Customs and Aduana, why they do what they do, how it works, and just be aware if you do get caught in Managua at the airport, like stuck in the system of having to deal with paying your Aduana fees there, you have to go currently off-site on a separate day. At least this is my experience. It's been a little while. And there it's like a lottery whether or not you'll get in that day. So you could end up spending multiple days in Managua with a lot of time spent hoping to get into Aduana, hoping you don't get taxed way more than you think you should, and then hoping to get out of there in the same day. It's not a fun process. It's much like going through the full national Immigración line. It can take a whole day and be very frustrating. So if you can avoid it at all, you'll want to. It's just not something you want to opt into, especially on a vacation. So I know a lot of people ask me, well, can I bring a whole bunch of things as gifts for people? You can. I generally wouldn't recommend it. Can I bring all these things? Like, no, they're small items, one item here and there. Absolutely, you can bring in stuff that goes in your luggage. Everyone does. Everyone needs a little, I need this little thing. Not a problem. But I think we all kind of have this internal, I'm bringing in stuff that's definitely not part of my tourism kit. That's what Aduana's there looking for. Anyway, I hope that gives you the information that you need. Of course, as always, get down there in those comments. Say hello. Ask your questions. Let me know what you think. If you would like to send in a video question, we love getting those from people. All the instructions are down there. All my contact, always down there. And if you'd like to support the channel, we're going to put a link up here, which is buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. That comes directly to me. Make sure you spell my name right. It'll come up. It's very clearly me with a little cartoon image of me that I've been using for years. And we also have a channel membership if you're interested in that. And I really appreciate everyone for supporting the channel. Happy New Year, and I will see all of you tomorrow.